Basically, what this is, it's a big Canadian picnic. There's a grandstand, there's bands from around town who play. There are foods, including poutine and Montreal smoked beef to be had. We think that's a great way to celebrate Canada.
Hi, you're listening to Beyond the Reefs, a show produced by Radio Taiwan International. Here we talk about socio-economic issues that are faced by Taiwan and their broader impact around the world beyond the reefs of this island nation. As of June 2025, the economies of Canada and Taiwan are facing surprisingly parallel pressures, from housing shortages to slowing GDP, and from a shifting global trade landscape to a renewed focus on bilateral investments. These two Pacific players have more in common than ever, whether or not their citizens, like us, realize it. Let's start in Canada, where the Bank of Canada has paused its key interest rate following an aggressive hiking cycle in 2023 and early 2024. The rate cuts that began late last year have helped nudge inflation down to 2.5%, but economic growth remains sluggish. At the same time, immigration-fueled population growth was straining urban infrastructure. Last year, Canada was on track to welcome over 1.3 million new residents, a historic high. This year, the government has decided to turn that tap off. But that didn't stop the fact that it fueled demand for housing, even as supply remains woefully inadequate. Average home prices in Vancouver and Toronto have stabilized but are still out of reach for most first-time buyers. Despite new federal housing initiatives, affordability remains the number one concern for many Canadians. Across the Pacific, Taiwan is experiencing a different demographic squeeze. While Canada's population was growing fast, Taiwan is shrinking fast. With a fertility rate still below 1, the island faces a long-term labor shortage, even as it struggles to retain young talent. Many young Taiwanese are seeking opportunities abroad, citing high housing prices and limited upward mobility. Taipei real estate remains amongst the least affordable in Asia relative to local wages. But despite these differences, there is a convergence in need. Both societies are looking outwards for talent, for capital, and for trade partnerships that can fuel their next chapter. Enter the Canada-Taiwan FIPA, or FIPA, also Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Arrangement. Since coming into force in late 2024, the agreement has already begun to reshape how Canadian and Taiwanese firms approach each other. Canadian SMEs, small and medium enterprises, have traditionally been underrepresented in Asia, lacking the network and resources to penetrate to complex markets like Taiwan. But with FIPA in place and the CTOT, Canadian Trade Office in Taipei, actively facilitating introductions, momentum is picking up. A trade delegation from Canada visited Taiwan just this spring, bringing investment officers from lesser-known provinces like Manitoba, Nova Scotia, and Prince Edward Island. Their pitch? Canada isn't just Toronto condos and Vancouver tech. It's renewable energy in the Maritimes, agri-tech in the prairies, and clean manufacturing in Ontario's secondary cities. And it worked. Several Taiwanese companies, including family-run manufacturers and mid-sized biotech firms, are now in exploratory talks about expanding into Canadian markets. Meanwhile, Taiwanese investors are keeping a close eye on Canadian real estate and infrastructure, not just as speculative assets, but as strategic footholds. For Taiwan, facing mounting pressure in global supply chains, diversifying its offshore presence is becoming a matter of economic resilience. Trade is only part of the story, though. There's also education. Taiwan continues to send a growing number of students to Canadian universities, drawn by post-study work opportunities and more welcoming immigration policies. In turn, Canadian schools are actively recruiting in Taiwan, offering bilingual programs, international baccalaureate tracks, and institutional partnerships with local universities. One area of growing synergy is green tech. Taiwan's Net Zero 2050 plan is accelerating demand for energy-efficient buildings and clean energy partnerships. Taiwanese firms, particularly in solar and battery tech, are well-positioned to supply these components. Collaborations between R&D centers in Taichung and research parks in Ontario are already underway. But bridging the cultural gap remains a challenge. As Ed Jager noted, Many Taiwanese still view Canada as a smaller extension of the US, while Canadians often conflate Taiwan with broader narratives about China. That's why public diplomacy, what some called, quote, economic storytelling, unquote, has become such a key part of CTOT's work. Events like Canada Day in Taipei, co-hosted by the Canadian Chamber of Commerce, helped humanize these ties. No ballroom galas, no champagne receptions, just poutine, smoked meat sandwiches, live music, and open invitation to Taiwanese families and Canadian ones to celebrate shoulder to shoulder with their Canadian neighbors. It's a small gesture, but one that speaks volume. So as Ed prepares to wrap up his position this summer, the office he helped lead is busier than ever, from passport renewals to trade facilitation, education outreach to cultural exchange. The Canadian Trade Office in Taipei continues to be a bridge between two democracies quietly navigating a volatile global economy. The irony, of course, is that while both countries often get overshadowed by their bigger neighbors, the US and China, their collaboration is precisely the kind of low-drama, high-value engagement the world needs right now. This episode is one in a two-part series speaking with Ed Jager, the Senior Trade Commissioner and Director of Trade and Investment at the Canadian Trade Office in Taipei. With extensive experience in international economic diplomacy, he leads efforts to strengthen Canada-Taiwan trade relations across sectors such as clean energy, innovation, and life sciences. Jager has played a key role in advancing the Foreign Investment Promotion and Protection Agreement, FIPA, supporting Taiwan's CPTPP ambitions and fostering bilateral cooperation on hydrogen energy and smart cities. A frequent speaker at regional forums and startup events, he champions Canadian innovation and works to deepen strategic ties between the two economies. So for the next two episodes here on Beyond the Reefs, let's have a chat with Ed Jager. Today, it's a great honor to have you here. Also, as a fellow Canadian, it's great to meet the person who's been servicing Taiwanese Canadian here in Taiwan. So, Ed, welcome to the show.
Joey, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have a chance to chat with you.
The pleasure is all mine. So I just read a whole bunch of things that I prepared, but why don't we hear your side of the story? What's your background and what made you come to Taiwan and take this job back in 2021?
I mean, Joey, my story is a bit of an unusual one. I have been now in the Foreign Service for about 25 years, but this is in fact my third career. I started in sales when I was 20 years old, and I was out and about trying to sell Dutch cheese and chocolates to Canadians, representing companies to other companies. At the same time, I started a family, those 5 kids I talked to you about earlier. But late in my 20s, I decided that I actually should get a university education, and I went back to law school. I got a degree, got called to the bar in Ontario, started practicing law, representing clients, did that for a few years, and realized there was even more fun to be had, and applied for and got into the Canadian Foreign Service. And for the last 25 years, I have been representing my country in different places, mostly on the trade side of things. My first posting in 2000 was in Jakarta. I've been to places like Lima, Peru, Sao Paulo, Brazil, Mongolia, doing my best to help Canadians expand their businesses abroad. And quite frankly, as I often like to put it, trying to put more money in the pockets of Canadians.
We will love that, especially with everything that's happening lately. We definitely could use a little bit more spending power. It seems like the Canadian housing crisis, it continues, and housing continues to be unaffordable, not just in Canada, really. Let's be fair. It's also quite unaffordable here in Taiwan.
Yeah.
But myself, as a Canadian Taiwanese, I have to be quite honest, Ed, I don't usually visit the office unless it's time to renew my passport.
Yeah.
But what's the main mission of the CTOT? I'm sure you guys do a lot more than just renewing passport.
Well, certainly we're here to serve Canadians and Canadian citizens with things like, as you say, passports and related to consular matters. But the biggest part of this mission is probably, first of all, the trade and investment section in terms of numbers of people. So we do exactly that. We try to help Canadian companies, a lot of small and medium enterprises as well, because it's difficult for smaller companies to get into markets like Taiwan. And so we're here to help them. We're just looking to find ways to expand our economy here. mean, as you know, Canada's economy is dominated, especially by the small and medium-sized enterprises. Generally speaking, SMEs are underrepresented in international trade. So that's a big part of what we do here on the trade side. But the other important half of this office, of course, is our general relations. And my colleagues in the general relations team, they are dedicated to sort of helping advance Canadian interests and values with a wide range of Taiwanese interlocutors, from the Taiwanese government to universities to think tanks and so on. As my colleague says, they like to think of themselves as explaining Canada to Taiwanese and explaining Taiwanese to Canadians.
Is there a lot of explaining that needs to happen on that front? I'm curious, because on the business side, I think, at least internationally, some of the bigger brands that is known to be Canadian, I guess, Lululemon, BlackBerry, but that was from a couple of decades ago. So nowadays, do you find that you need to tell Taiwanese more about where the Canadian economy is going?
I think I do. The problem is both Taiwan and Canada have very large neighbors who tend to predominate the international scene. And so Canadians, when they're looking towards this part of the world, don't always first see Taiwan and don't always understand the distinction between Taiwan and some of its neighbors. And exactly the same is true in reverse. Okay, a lot of Taiwanese, when they look to North America, they see the United States and they sort of clump Canada, as Donald Trump famously likes to say, as the 51st state. But they don't understand that we are not part of the United States and that we are a distinct, different culture. We have different ways of doing business. We have different ways of treading our path through the world. And so we do need to help Taiwanese understand Canada, and we do need to help Canadians understand Taiwan.
Okay.
But the reality is, anecdotally, I can tell you there's continued growth of Canadian companies coming here and in the other direction. There's certainly our efforts to attract investment has grown. Just last month, we had what we call our an investment roadshow, where we had people from across Canada who work for economic development offices in municipalities and provinces come to Taiwan. And we had a full day event where in the morning we had some key speakers. In the afternoon, we had brought in companies from across Taiwan to talk to these investment experts from Canada. And out of that, we have some really good leads, some companies that are looking, people who had not considered places in Canada like Prince Edward Island or Manitoba that they had ever considered before, who are starting to talk about the possibility of investing in these places. And so we certainly have seen an uptick in promotion as a result of the FIPA. And I expect that to continue long after I'm gone, because I believe that there are so many opportunities, so many good ways for this to continue, that I'm certain it will.
Yeah, there's so much work to be done there at, as you mentioned, PEI and Manitoba. That is even if Taiwanese investors or people generally know about these places. I think most people, when they think of Canada, if they can point it out on a map, are places like Vancouver and Toronto and Ottawa, where you're from. So there's a lot for Taiwanese people to learn about, for sure. But as you just mentioned that you are nearing your 4-term posting here in Taiwan, would you like to take a moment to reflect on the last 4 years, whether you enjoyed your stay here in Taiwan, and looking forward, what do you hope CTOT can bring to Taiwan and Canada trade relations?
We're aware of just how important Canada-Taiwan relationship is. It's been something that we've been working hard on. I arrived in September of 21. I came here for a 4-year posting, and so I only have a month or so left. It has been a real pleasure, a highlight of my career, to be working here in Taiwan, both professionally and personally. It's been a really good place to be for 4 years. It's going to be hard for me to tear myself away from Taiwan, but I will take along some wonderful memories. very pleased to talk to you about it, Joey.
Yeah, just Ed, one last thing. Don't forget to change out your wardrobe when you go back to Ottawa because the climate is very drastically different.
When I go back to Ottawa, that'll might be a few years yet. I'm hoping to go somewhere else.
Oh, great. Okay, well, looking forward to hear where you'll be posting next, and maybe we can speak with you again soon from that location. But on a lighter side of things, Ed, I'd like to talk about an event that is coming our way this very weekend, or if you're listening to the web version of the show, last weekend. That is the Canada Day celebration. In my general impression as a Canadian Taiwanese, I think of CTLT as the sort of more serious organization out of the two Canadian representative offices in Taiwan. The other one is CCCT, which is Canadian Chamber of Commerce in Taiwan. They seem to hold all of these, fun events where you guys are stuck with doing all the consular service stuff and all the trade stuff. However, there's one day in a year where you both come together and have a little bit of fun, and that is happening for us when we're having this conversation. That's happening tomorrow, but if you're listening to the show, it just took place this weekend. Is the Canada Day, the D'(EH) event. So tell us about this. Are you going to be there? What's happening here?
Well, I mean, the CCCT for years already has been organizing a big event on the last Saturday on or before July the 1st. And they have just renewed an agreement to use the Haka Park for at least the next 5 years. And so if you've missed the 2025 edition, mark it in your calendar for 2026 and 27 and 28 and 29 at the Haka Park. Basically, what this is, it's a big Canadian picnic. There's a grandstand. There's bands from around town who play. There are foods, including poutine and Montreal smoked beef to be had. There's a lot of Canadians love to come out and just celebrate. And we love the fact that it is a no charge entry open event that Taiwanese are welcome to come in and enjoy it with us. Some of my colleagues in different places around the world tend to organize fancy receptions in hotel rooms for Canada Day. We don't do that here. We put our effort into working together with the CCCT to do the family picnic in the Haka Park on a Saturday afternoon. That works better for us here in Taiwan. And given the size of the Canadian community here in Taiwan, and given the interest the Taiwanese generally show in Canada, we think that's a great way to celebrate Canada.
And I would tend to agree. And don't forget, this might be the final opportunity that you have to see Ed live in living color at the Taipei Canada Day event. And a final reminder to any of you who may or may not decide to visit, don't forget that while Canada Day, or the Canadian National Day celebration, lands on July 1st, which is so close to the U.S.'s Independence Day of July 4th, and it's often overlooked as a holiday. The celebration of Canada Day is just as fun as, if not more fun. In fact, the food that we have, as Ed mentioned, poutine and the Montreal smoked beef sandwiches, those are, if not on par, perhaps even better than, say, Texas-style or Memphis-style barbecue in the U.S. Now, to conclude, in a way, what Ed said about being overlooked, Canadians not seeing Taiwan and Taiwanese not really seeing Canada, stays with me, because beyond the numbers, the trade deals, and the policy language, what we're really talking about is visibility, recognition. Two places that often live in the shadows of their biggest neighbors, but that are carving out something quietly and significantly together. This episode has only scratched the surface. There are more stories to tell of businesses that made the leap, of students who found new lives abroad, and of policies that seem boring on paper, but that end up challenging and changing people's lives. And as we move through this two-part series, we're going to keep asking, how do economies like Canada and Taiwan build resilient, meaningful relationships in a time of global uncertainty? And more personally, what does this mean to make a life or living across borders? In the next episode, we'll be taking a step back from the official language of trade offices and dive into the messier, more human side of international work. Because behind every diplomat, every small business founder, every student studying abroad, there's someone taking a risk. And if you've ever wondered what it takes to navigate that, well, stay tuned. You've been listening to Beyond the Reefs, and we'll see you next week.